Welcome to the ReaderHouse Author Roundtable. I'm Alice Stockton Rossini. We're going to start off this show with several stories of survival and determination to overcome what some might consider insurmountable odds. But the next couple of authors are proof you really can do just about anything if you put your mind to it. Kory W. Nelson is currently working on his certification to become a substance abuse counselor. But it was a long road getting to this point as he battled his own addiction, a battle he details in his book, 180 Degrees in 180 Days. So, Kory, you say you always liked writing in a journal, and it seems that did play a big role in your recovery and writing this book.
Yes. So I tried to do it's called a line a day, where you write down at least something that's going on throughout the day. Writing about what's going on in my life and how I'm feeling.
Did that help you kind of deal with some of the issues that you were having?
Yeah, it did. 180 Degrees in 180 Days is a short story about struggling with, but ultimately overcoming addiction. I wrote this when I hit 180 days of sobriety. I was doing some self-reflecting about what my life was like now in recovery versus what my life was like in active addiction. And as a successful retail manager, I had 165 employees that worked for me. I would put on a fake smile and had a fake persona every day. On the surface, everything looks fine, but looks can be deceiving. I was an alcoholic, and I was also addicted to painkillers. My addiction eventually took everything from me. It took my family, home, career, and even tried to take my life. When COVID-19 happened, everything shut down. I lost my job. I was unable to pay my bills. I actually ended up homeless for almost 2 years and spent pretty much the entire pandemic on the streets. While on the streets, my substance abuse problems only got worse, and I got hooked on fentanyl. And then my life really began to spiral out of control. That drug completely consumed every fiber of my being, and I would do anything to get it so that I didn't have to withdraw from it. I began shoplifting from stores just to be able to get something of value so that I could trade to get my fix. I was always starving and was worried about where my next meal was going to come from because I never actually had money. And if I did, every penny of that went to drugs. Because if it came down to food or drugs, the drugs won every time because I was worried about getting dope sick. I used to be the person that was responsible for ordering everything and making sure that the shelves were stocked. And now I was the person that was coming into the store to steal from them. It was only a matter of time until I got caught shoplifting. And I did get caught and was arrested for shoplifting and for drug-related offenses multiple times. I was in and out of jail. I had basically become a loser, and I had lost pretty much all hope for my life. I began battling with some serious depression. I didn't want to actually die because death scared me, but I wanted all the pain to stop. Everything culminated with my addiction on August 8th, 2022, when I got high and overdosed. I woke up in the hospital after getting hit with Narcan, and the first thing the doctor said to me was, "Welcome back, sir. We thought we had lost you. You have been unconscious and unresponsive for over 4 hours." I tried to sit up in the bed, but I couldn't because I was handcuffed to the bed because the cops were the ones that found me, and I had a warrant for my arrest for failing to appear in court. In that moment, I've never felt more alone in my entire life, and I couldn't do anything but close my eyes and begin to cry. I hadn't seen my family in almost 3 years, and I had missed the last 3 Thanksgivings and 3 Christmases. But during this 180 days of sobriety, I had spent every day living and being around family. And you best believe that I did not miss Thanksgiving or Christmas that year. I'm now 29 months clean, and I'm trying to share my story with other people who are struggling with addiction. Because now that I'm no longer contributing to the problem, I want to be part of the solution. It's been a long journey, but I haven't looked back since.
Oh my gosh. I guess the moral of the story is you have to get to the root of what drove you there.
Yes, exactly.
And what was it that made you feel so despondent to the point where you wound up in this situation?
So actually, when I was in high school, uh, I was a captain of my wrestling team, and I broke my wrist, and I got prescribed painkillers. And back then, I didn't even really know what addiction was, and I didn't know why I was doing some things I would do. All I knew is that I needed more, and I wanted more. And I've dealt with a lot of addiction issues throughout my life because of it, to both, narcotics and alcohol. And I've gone through different periods of my life where, I would get clean and then something would happen and it would just, kind of be a downfall. And then when COVID-19 happened, it was everything just kind of shut down. And, I just went into a really bad depression and started self medicating, and just everything kind of spiraled and went downhill from there.
But it all started with that injury and prescription drugs.
Yes, exactly.
I've talked to addicts, former recovering addicts, because I guess you're recovering for the rest of your life, right?
Yes.
That would go out on the street and talk to people on the street, in terms of getting your book out. Any thoughts on that?
Yes, I mean, I would like to. I would love to go, speak at any kind of counseling or any kind of conventions. I always love to talk to people and stop and talk to them on the streets, because I've been there. I've been in their shoes. I know what that's like. Just I feel like being homeless out there in the streets, a lot of times people they're forgot about, and their of course their families miss them, but they just kind of disappear and fall into the abyss. And it's sad. We are in the midst of a pandemic right now, especially the opioid pandemic, and it's killing over 100,000 people in the United States every year. I, I mean, it's a serious problem.
Can you go to like Narcotics Anonymous or any of these groups and share your story?
Yes, I do. So I actually got enrolled in a program called Bicycle Health, and it saved my life. And I still am enrolled in that program. I don't have to be, I'm not court ordered or anything, but I wanted to better myself. And it's something that I still go to. And that's actually how everything got started. I wrote 108 degrees for 180 in 108 days when I hit 108 days of sobriety. And I I wrote it for myself because I had a lot of pain and a lot of trauma that was going in my head. And I was one of those people that used to just suppress all my emotions and feelings. And I wouldn't open up and talk to anyone. And it just kind of all got bottled up. And I was going crazy. I'm not going to lie. I was driving myself insane because I really had no outlets and I didn't feel comfortable because of the stigma and the shame and the guilt around it of addiction. I didn't feel comfortable talking about it. So, one day I was just sitting there around when I hit my 108 days of sobriety, and I was just thinking and reflecting on everything. And I took all that pain and trauma in my head, and I wrote it down on some paper. And, I got to tell you, it was almost therapeutic for me because even though I didn't want to tell anyone else what was going on, I took all those pain and I finally got it out of my head. And, I felt like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders when I did that. And so I went to finally built up the courage, and I actually shared my story in a couple of my counseling groups. And the feedback was unexpected, and it was incredible because I was not expecting. So I didn't write this to publish it, and I think that's kind of what makes it sort of unique. Is I know that I know a lot of people write stories and they want to get it published, and I was never opposed to that, but it was more so I did it for myself and just the people I was sharing it with in the groups. I would always ask for feedback afterwards, and the feedback was overwhelming, and people were emotional about it, and they told me that they believe my story could and would help people if given the chance, and that I should go publish it. And so I took a lot of that encouragement and I finally sent it to a publisher and I did get it published.
That's an amazing story. And God, I hope you know how lucky you are, because so many of my friends, my kids' friends, my kids are your age, didn't make it.
Yeah,
So it's wonderful to hear that it's possible. It's really possible to get through this, come out on the other side, and help others.
definitely. It was definitely kind of a surreal feeling the first time that I ever saw and held my completed book in my hands. Honestly, I felt a sense of pride and gratitude that I'm no longer in that struggle of addiction, and just kind of felt like an amazing accomplishment, and one that 29 months ago, because I'm 29 months clean now, I would have never thought this was possible. And I would not be where I am today if it were not for my Savior and Lord Jesus Christ. And I could not do any of this without him. So all glory goes to God.
All right, Kory W. Nelson, 180 degrees in 180 days. Thank you.
Thank you.
Elia Mendoza shares her story of survival, best illustrated in the title of her book, Silent Strength: Shadows of Domestic Violence and Workplace Bias. Elia, your nightmare began about 13 years ago when your kids were little and you were in an abusive relationship. What made you decide, I have to tell my story now?
My children, my 16-year-old daughter, um, I went through domestic violence. It was a horrific experience, and I don't want my daughter to go through it. I don't want her or any other woman or person think that it's okay just because it's entrenched in the cultural Hispanic Mexican culture. It's it doesn't matter where we come from. It doesn't matter who our family is or our religion. It is not okay. It is never okay to endure any type of violence.
And then, as if that wasn't bad enough, you suffered workplace bias.
Yes, the stigma of being a victim of domestic violence paints me or paints us as unintelligent, unreliable, like something is wrong with us. Uh, and we were overlooked. I mean, I was overlooked for promotions. I was overlooked for a lot of things, just because I was a single mom with other responsibilities.
How do you tell your story?
The start of my story is with the event that made me realize that if I didn't get out, I could potentially die in that situation in front of my kids. That's where my story starts. In one of these many abuse situations, typically he would only physically harm me, sexually abuse. But this one time, he actually used a knife and tried to kill me,
Oh, jeez.
and in front of my kids. That's when I realized that I needed to get out.
You mentioned cultural. How is this culturally acceptable?
In the Mexican culture, it is culturally accepted in many families, in many regions of the state, of the country. It's something that, and it's not only cultural, but it also comes with religion ties to it, because in Catholicism, you choose your husband, you have a husband, no matter what happens, you stay, because it's a sin to divorce, it's a sin to separate. So you chose, or that's the husband that your God gave you, so you stay and you endure it. And it's something culturally accepted, many times accepted by religion. Religion is a big part of the Mexican culture, therefore is accepted most of the time.
Did your family know what's going on? Do you talk in your book about, was there anybody you could turn to?
Yes, my family knew. I briefly touch on that in the book. My family knew what was going on. They tried to support me as much as they could, but only one of my siblings, my sister, only one of them was like, you gotta go. But obviously it's a choice that the victim has to make.
Did your mom live a similar life?
No, my mom did not have, there's no physical abuse ever, but physical abuse is not the only form of abuse. There's other types of abuse. There's
Right.
financial abuse, there's psychological abuse. Um, his family, his father, he did suffer a lot of abuse on the hands of his father. His
Mm,
father nearly killed his mom.
yeah.
He would beat all of him and all his other children on a daily basis. So he did have a lot of trauma growing up.
I think it's a miracle that you were able to get out of there with 2 kids, get your act together, and then get a job. Did writing help you work through this?
Yeah, so my family friends, they knew they knew that something had happened, that there was abuse, that there was physical abuse, but they didn't know all the details of it. I never told anyone what had actually happened. I never told anyone that I tried to commit suicide multiple times. They never knew all of that. So writing it helped me close that chapter of my life. And I don't feel humiliated or I don't feel embarrassed anymore, but by why by what I lived in that life. It's now empowering. I'm not subjected. I don't see myself as a victim anymore. I see myself as a survivor.
And you didn't get psychological help or anything. You just soldiered on.
Exactly.
Wow.
That's another cultural stigma, cultural thing that there's no such thing as counseling or psychological help. And there was no time. I was a single mom with 2 kids and full-time job and trying to go back to school.
How did they find out what you had gone through at work?
Well, at work, it wasn't really the stigma of being a survivor. At work, it was more of being a single mother. Just by being a single mom, we're already stigmatized as unreliable or unintelligent. At that time, I didn't have a college degree. I only had a high school diploma. Although I was doing the work, I was demonstrating that I was capable. I was still being passed on of promotions because I didn't have a degree and because I have all these other responsibilities as a single mom. So I was always unreliable, unintelligent because of being a single mom. And then whenever I told a friend or anyone that I was a survivor or I was a victim, then it got even worse. I was just stigmatized as, oh, this poor single mom or this poor single woman, let's not give her any more work. One of the examples that I write in my book is when I was working at a warehouse in the Washington State area where I live is agriculturally rich. And I worked at one in the HR department of one of the apple packing warehouses in one of the areas. And I was doing all of the, what do they call it? The healthcare enrollment forms, all of the enrollment. This is back when Obamacare came into place and all of the employers had to offer medical coverage to their employees. So I came in and I did all the work, all the retroactive work. I saved them thousands, if not millions of dollars in penalties. But I never received the credit because I was just me. As if I wasn't because I was under the direction of someone with a college degree, although I did all the work. So all the credit didn't go to me. My subordinates who helped me, they were making more money than I was, although I was their supervisor. Bonuses didn't go to me for all those millions of dollars that I saved them. They went to someone else who took the credit.
So what did you do?
Well, there was nothing I could do because this company and many others the owners, they are stinking rich. They are very old school, male-led old school organizations. Employees like myself, we couldn't even get a meeting with the owners or anyone in the higher ups. Everything was handled below them. Nothing would get to them. And then when I finally got another job at a government agency, I was retaliated against. And I also talk about that in my book. I was retaliated against for leaving. I shouldn't have resigned. I should have just quit. But that's one of the examples. Another, I mean, in various places, I mean, racism was, I mean, it happens all the time. It happened all the time. Being talked down, humiliated, given tasks that I shouldn't have been given, that should have gone to someone else. But because I was the Mexican girl, single mom, who only had a high school diploma, they would go to me, although I was capable of much more.
Did you mail a copy of this book to those people? That's what I want to know.
They know. Yeah, they know that I wrote the book. I don't know if they read it. I don't know, but hopefully they do.
Do you think things have changed that much in the workplace since then?
No, no, I don't think so. Especially in these warehouses, that are so old school male dominated organizations. It's not going to change, and they don't care. I mean, they're so big, they're so rich that, I mean, anyone is replaceable to them.
Yeah. How are you talking about your book? How are you getting it out there?
I had some reading engagements. I do social media. I've done some interviews. I have, through my work at a state agency, I have a lot of connections with TV stations and radio stations. I've been doing that as well.
That's how people are finding you.
Yes, and I also just published the Spanish version of it.
Oh, that's great. Good for you. You going to keep writing?
I don't know. This is a very short book. It only has some of the stuff that I went through. I definitely do want to go and do a second part or something. There's still so much that needs to be said. My book starts, or this event happened after I went back to my abuser for the second time. And unfortunately, something that I do want to bring awareness to the community is that if a victim is finally able to get out of a situation, if they don't find the right support, they more than likely will end up going back because there's no support as a survivor. And that's one of the things that I want to do. The stigma of being a survivor many times, and the judgment many times, forces us to go back.
All right, Elia Mendoza, powerful book you got here. Silent Strength, Shadows of Domestic Violence and Workplace Bias.
Thank you.
Writing poetry got Jenni Lynn through some of her toughest times while she was growing up, and she found the same kind of comfort while writing her book, Battle Cry, My Journey to Purpose During My Biggest Storms. And it seems this book has been a process of writing and going back and rewriting.
I really started writing in 2021 when I was going through my divorce. It was just kind of a gateway out of my mind, to kind of get me through things, write it on paper, get it off, the trauma I was going through. Especially I have a little one. He was 2 at the time, 1 to 2. So I wrote it, and, my boyfriend currently right now, he told me, this is great. You need to publish this. And I was like, no, I don't think I need to do that. And he's like, I mean, it's totally up to you, but I think it could really help people. So I sat on it, started to think about it. And then I took a break until 2024 because what I was writing originally, it was just angry. It wasn't coming from a place of peace. So I took a break and then came back the beginning, January of 2024, and revised, got rid of some stuff, added some things about what I was going through from 2021 to now, and obviously what I went through in my past. And it just ended up being really good after that. And it sounded better. It was really hard to kind of put myself out there, but I knew that the purpose of me doing it was to help other people. So that's where I'm at now. And I feel like I have.
You feel like you're helping people?
Yes. So I once I got my book in my hands, well, before that, I let everybody know that it was being published. So everyone was kind of prepared and kind of what it was about on my socials. And then once it was out and it was ready for people to grab, I've had people send me photos and, comments that your inspiration, you're wonderful, you've saved my life. I didn't think that I could get through certain things, because my biggest thing about getting through any struggle is I envision a mountain. They're all climbing a mountain, and we shouldn't look down. We need to just keep climbing. So usually anybody that reaches out to me, I always let them know, just keep climbing and don't look down, whatever you do. So that's my big motto in life. I tell my family and friends that all the time. I tell myself. And I also started a podcast called Persevere Podcast on Spotify. It's also on Apple and Amazon podcast. So I started that this year when my book was released, well, last year. And I've had people, I just kind of talk about daily things, like just subjects like, how do we get through divorce? How do we get through being a mom? How do we get through, if somebody's going through addiction or an overthinker, just different topics to kind of connect with my book. And just let people know that my book isn't the end all. I want to keep talking about it.
That's a beautiful thing.
So people that I know that have asked, hey, can I talk? We talk about, my son passed away from suicide, or, and no pressure, like just basically sitting down with them and saying, don't have to say any names, it can be confidential. We can just talk about how you're feeling and how you get through it for other people that are going through the same thing.
Let's talk about your book, Battle Cry. You say it's more than just a memoir. It's a roadmap to personal transformation.
Yeah, so I introduced myself in the beginning of, so when people read it, like who I am as a person, like how I grew up, where I was from. And then I go into stories. So I talk about my childhood and different scenarios about what happened to me and how I got through it, so people can understand how I felt during it and what I did to get out of it, but still working on myself at the same time. I think that's my biggest thing with this book, is as I'm going through some short stories from different scenarios, like my divorce. I was sexually molested by a family member in one of my chapters. I talk about that. I talk about high school. I talk about my son, and all those different things, and how, God got me through everything, even when I didn't think I could get through it. I talk about that even with quotes. I have different Bible verses or quotes that have just appeared in my life, so it's kind of a visual for people to read it and think, oh my goodness, let me highlight this. This is something I could use daily. During my divorce, I talk about kind of what happened, not like details, but how it made me feel, kind of what happened with my ex-husband and with Jax, my son, and moving out, and how I persevered through that, how it was one of the most difficult things I've ever been through, not only just by what happened, but my self-worth, not feeling worthy. So I talk about that in the scenario of getting my own apartment and working and being a single mom. And some of the quote was about, like, in the Bible, there's a lot of quotes that talk about no fear, like God doesn't want us to fear. So my constant process through the divorce was I was fearing everything in my life. Where was I going to end up? What was going to happen to me physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually? So not fearing in the Bible was like my biggest quote in the Bible for all of them. I mean, I have probably about 20 plus in some of the chapters just talking about not fearing, and just, God getting me through all that stuff. But that was one of my biggest chapters on that, because I know a lot of people go through divorce and they go through different scenarios.
How long were you married?
I was married, let me think, we got married in 2018, and the divorce was final in 2021.
Oh, not long at all.
No, we separated in 2020. It was a lot. It was, marriage, baby, divorce.
Do you talk about what happened, why you were divorced?
Yeah. So during the initial, process of getting divorced while we were separated, I talk about, days where I couldn't even go to work, where I just couldn't get out of bed. The days I didn't have Jax, being separated from him at such a young age was probably the hardest thing I probably ever went through, because being a new mom and needing him, he was my savior. Um, he got me up he got me up in the morning. So when I didn't have him, we do shared parenting. That was the hardest thing. And I do talk about that. I also battled depression really, really bad. So I talk about how I had to go to my doctors to get on medicine, which I started to get a little bit attached to. So I do talk about a situation with that, and how it kind of took me down a really dark mental depression road during my divorce.
And all of this you share through your podcast. So now you've got kind of a circle going on. You've got your story. You've got a place where people can reach out to you, where you can help other people. Are you going to keep going with this? Is there another book in the works?
Yeah, so right now I actually am working on a new book called Victory Cry. So instead of Battle Cry, it's Victory Cry. So it's I just started it. I started doing it this month, and thinking through it the end of last year, but it's kind of going to be like a journal entry in a way, like how my life is for the year of 2025. I got through everything else. Like, where's my life going? Where am I heading? My podcast is out now. What can I put out there in my book to readers to be a positive advocate to them on my daily life? Because what I want people to understand is I'm not perfect. Even though I know how to get out of certain situations, I'm always a work in progress. We all are. We go through things that are going to feel like they're damaging us. So I kind of want to put a book out there that's kind of talking about my daily life in a positive way.
This is great. Any advice for aspiring authors?
Just go with your heart. I know a lot of people have reached out and they've have asked me, like, how do you do it? I can't get through certain poems or chapters because I'm stuck. I always tell people, go to a quiet place, listen to music. If something inspires you, put it in your phone so that you don't forget about it and write about it, so you can go home and write. If you're not ready to write, don't do it, because then you're just going to get stuck into a whirlpool of confusion. Just do it when you're ready and write from the heart.
Good advice. Jenni Lynn, Battle Cry, My Journey to Purpose During My Biggest Storms. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for calling me.
A high school math teacher, John Aris Eleleme, has written papers for colleges and universities, but this is his first published work. It is a book entitled Finding Oases Within the Wilderness of Our Socio-Political Ideologies. It seems you believe Americans lack a basic understanding of how democracy works.
Well, if I go back a little bit, I was in my math class teaching, and then my students started arguing over something. So something that happened that changed my views on how Americans and American citizens really perceive their government. So two of my students, as they were arguing on the principles of democracy, which indeed was an overflow from their American history class. So the bone of contention was who owned democracy. It seems at that point the whole class became interested in the same topic. When they couldn't resolve it, then they finally decided to ask me, the teacher. And for several minutes, I addressed the topic to their full attention. Democracy belongs to all the people, including non-citizens who don't have a vote. In many ways, democracy affects all, and our attitudes and behavior as well affect democracy. Then after that, I reminded them we are still in a math class, so let's complete our assignment. So they were sighing and arching and, no. So we had to return to the reality. So this event led to my writing this awesome book. I believe when people read the first page, they won't stop until they read the last page. I continued to read my own book over and over and over. Yeah, so that's one what led me to that, and then the political climate, the atmosphere, the chaos, the misunderstanding, the infighting for the past 10 years, at least. So this led me to writing this book.
So tell me what this book is about.
So this book, the title, as you know, Finding Oasis Within the Wilderness of Socio-Political Ideologies.
Right.
It's a fascinating and thought-provoking kind of book. So it's not just my opinion. I collected information about people's views and other opinions, facts, evidences. I made sure that I carry out the research to have the true facts to use in this book. So it's kind of a foundational book to remind or give information to all Americans about democracy, that democracy is a government of the people. It belongs to the people, 100% of the people, not one section or one faction or one tribe or one sub-race. It belongs to all Americans, to be chosen, selected by all Americans for the welfare, safety, security, and well-being of all Americans. So when we understand this, and we know that we are all in it together, then we can definitely cut down on these infightings that are going on in our political system. So the purpose of this book is to give hope and inspiration to all the citizens, to provide them with knowledge of a government as a democratic institution with a structure designed to serve the people and not the reverse.
Well, it sounds to me that you feel like we're not getting something here, that we're missing something.
To the whole country.
Yeah, and that through your book, you want to talk about what you feel is missing.
That's right.
And what do you feel is missing here in our democracy?
Well, what is missing here is that the people's idea of what democracy is all about. If you take, for example, exams, tests that are given to incoming new citizens, you understand what I mean?
Yeah.
It seems the new citizens, kind of go through several studies, including constitutional studies, in order to be confirmed as American citizens. So they tend to have so much basic knowledge about our democracy than those who were born here. So because they had to study for those tests, if you don't pass it, you are not going to be confirmed as a citizen. So based on that, they tend to have a little bit more formalized knowledge of what democracy is all about, instead of looking at it from the perspective of how people feel about it or what we think about it, in terms of we are the one to be in power, everybody else should be under us. So this helps the incoming citizens to understand how democracy works in America. But unfortunately, most people who were born here don't have that knowledge, because there's no much of civic education in schools. American history or world history is not the same as civic education. So this is to alert the people, let them wake up and know why we are having so much problem in our democracy, a democracy which is supposed to be one of the best governments the world has ever, invented. Government system that the world has ever invented is looking weak when it's supposed not to be weak. Is looking chaotic when it's not supposed to be, because the people managing our democracy, the people we vote in, definitely are not following the Constitution and the rule of law in dealing with this. And then, according to Plato, the penalties for refusing to participate in politics is that you end up being governed by your inferiors. And you can agree with me that that is what is going on right now, where people without much knowledge of administration and government are in the government. In that sense, they are there for self-interest and greed.
So you want people to stand up against this. Because as you say here in your synopsis, the power of citizenry can only be expressed through bonding together as a union and not individual fights.
Right. So what I mean is that for us to be able to really make advanced progress in moving towards a more perfect union, it has to be the fight that involves every citizen. And then in order to get every citizen to understand what this fight is all about, we have to let them know that misunderstanding, sort of misinformation, disinformation, propaganda, manipulation, and all that is going on is to disrupt the thinking of Americans from actually picking up the power that belongs to them under the Constitution as the owners of the government. So to get every part of this country to understand that we cannot stand individually or in selected groups and hope to succeed in making our democracy better than before. We can only do that when everybody knows the purpose of our democracy, and then be able to come together based on thinking and understanding to move this nation forward.
Well said, John. Did you bring this book back into the classroom?
Well, since it was released in November 2024, I have had a lot of conversations with many people, giving information about the book. And so many people, according to their responses, they bought the book and they feel the book is powerful and thought-provoking. And they are reading it, that they understand what it is. And that I kind of stated the reasons why things are the way they are and give some suggestions on how we can get through this difficult moment. So I will continue in the process of giving information out about the book, contacted people I know on social media and sending this information electronically to them.
That's one way to go. Thank you, John Aris Eleleme, finding oasis within the wilderness of our socio-political ideologies.
Thank you for calling. I appreciate it.
And now for something completely different. Robby Barbarian expects to publish 10 children's books in a series by the end of next year. Now, today we're talking about The Day the Red Hen Crowed. Robby, tell me about this series, of course, but how is it you're so prolific?
I actually wrote and illustrated most of the stories that are coming out. I wrote them over 30 years ago.
Oh, well, that explains it.
I've always been a poet. And in growing up on a farm in Scotland Neck, North Carolina, I was exposed to a lot of different things like chickens, not just in the yard, but you could actually see the chickens underneath the house through the floorboards. And we always had a number of different types of farm animals. And long story short, it inspired me to write children's stories. And I just never got a chance to really hone in on the editing, illustrations that I needed to correct. And I was raising two sons, and I've been married for 35 years. And so now that I'm retired, I have a lot of time on my hands now.
All right. So tell me what's going on with this red hen.
The story is about Wicked Weasel and Slippery Fox, who they make this bet that whichever one of them can get Red Hen to leave her hen house would win, and the other one would have to leave the farm. And it has a twist on the end. But I think the title of the book pretty much says it all. The day Red Hen crowed. If you know anything about farm animals, you'll know that only the rooster crows.
So there you go.
Yeah. The story is about the weasel and the fox, and it's about who can basically get into that hen house and get Red Hen to leave so that they can get the eggs. And it's a well-known fact that Red Hen will not leave her hen house. Under no circumstances will she leave. And the opening of the story starts out with Ricky Rooster crowing to wake up the rest of the farm, and it goes from there to these two on the path, Slippery Fox and Wicked Weasel, who are watching the farmyard, and they're plotting, and they make this wager, and one of them comes out in the end, but there's going to be a return of one of them in the next book.
So does one book go into the next book, go into the next book?
Yes.
Does each book have a moral or a lesson?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Don't believe everything you see.
Is that for the whole series?
No. I like creating new plots and new endings with every one of them. I like to keep people guessing, and there's a lesson in every children's story that I've ever written. And sometimes you can see things that you think are real, and if you stop and think about what you're actually looking at, not everything that you see is believable. Mm. And when you see Ricky Rooster crowing to get the morning started, and at the end of it all, you see Red Hen run out from under the hen house, and after the dust has settled, she flies up to the top of the fence post, and she crows loudly and proudly.
Okay. Why did you start writing these books in the first place?
It was actually, I was in the Marine Corps, and it was more of self-therapy, because I suffer from depression, and I suffer from anxiety, and writing calms the savage beast, and it allows me to finish my bucket list of things. And it, at the same time, it helps children to understand the moral values and how important it is to have morals, and good values. And I taught both my sons how to become not just good sons, but good men. And, lift people up. Don't tear them down. Doesn't matter who they are. If I can help someone as I pass along, if I can cheer someone with a word or song, if I can show someone that he or she is traveling wrong, then my living will not be in vain. Martin Luther King said that back in the 60s, and it holds true in my life. That's the standard.
That's a beautiful thing. So now, are you in a position to go into your local schools or libraries to read these books to the kids and talk about the books?
I used to give little lectures to the children at the behest of the teachers.
Oh.
We had a lot of troubled youth in Scotland Neck, and the teachers wanted me to tell them how I grew up and how I overcame poverty, and some of the tripwires that a lot of the kids find themselves exposed to.
That's great. What did you do for a living?
I actually inspected houses after I came out of the Marine Corps, but my first job when I came out, it only took me 8 months to get promoted to assistant foreman, was Purdue Chicken Farms.
That's funny.
Yeah. And then I decided, and it was at Purdue that I started writing The Day Red Hen Crowed, and you're getting it out of me. And then I started writing Chicken Legs and Feet, which it was just submitted.
That's great.
And then, yeah.
Can't wait to talk to you again.
Well, the next time I'll tell you about the hog farm that I worked on, and I became an assistant farm manager when I went out there. Now that is that's another story.
Oh,
yeah.
I'm looking forward to that. All right, Robby. Robby Barbarian, The Day the Red Hen Crowed. Thanks.
Thank you for being so patient. And also, may you live as long as you want and never want as long as you live.
Thank you. And last but not least, for Cameron James Box, boredom was the springboard for his creativity that led to the publication of his sci-fi adventure trilogy. His first book was entitled Immortal Tears, and today we're talking about Mortal Ties. So boredom, not all bad, right?
I had issues in school, so I would sit there and I would, make characters and draw, and I wanted to have, like a setting for them. So that's how that started. I generally was I'm a very artistic guy, so I would spend most of my days just drawing away, making maps for, these made up settings. And I just ended up being like, hey, maybe this would be kind of cool if, they had a setting and maybe a story arc and, a bunch of worlds colliding kind of thing. Mortal Ties and all the books that I've been working on have been something I've been working on for a while now, in the background of my everyday life. And I just decided that I wanted to, start publishing it and getting it out there so people can, see the wacky world I was working on.
Well, tell me about this wacky world. Tell me about Ullin the Exile.
So in the lands of Fernirtis, there are many factions, and I don't want to ramble because I can ramble on about it. But for Ullin, his home, their whole product of life is that they believe that they made themselves. So their reputation, their life is based around, looks and, very vain kind of culture. And so he's been exiled for, a crime he hasn't really done. He was, in the wrong place at the wrong time. So he's sort of on this pilgrimage to prove that some myths within this fantasy world can be proven. And he's, going down this rabbit hole of conspiracies and, making friends, of course, on the way. The journey is the reward kind of thing.
Give me an example.
All right. So in the beginning, where he's sort of like trying to find his ropes, he's in a continent called Near. It's a frozen wasteland, sort of like a Viking-esque kind of place. There's ruins scattered around like tundras and these giant deciduous forests. And he runs into a woman there, and she is one of my favorite characters. Her name is Vesper Falmenti Dasha, and she's from a city called Viriton that's like an island nation. And she's a monster hunter, and her job is kind of explanatory. She hunts monsters. And so she meets up with him, sort of out of the blue. She shows up. She's not very discreet. She's a very blunt character. So she walks up and she states, she's like, "So what's your story?" And so Ulin, he looks over to her, and he's been traveling for months. This frozen wasteland he's got a burly beard now. He's kind of grizzled looking. And he's like, I don't have a story. What are you talking about, crazy lady? And she's like, everybody has a story. I just need to find out what's your story. And that sort of builds onto their relationship. And she kind of shows him the ropes, and he's been traveling without a weapon. And she's like, you're going to need a weapon. So I'm going to take you down to the blacksmith kind of thing. And it sort of like builds in the first few chapters build on their relationship as, them getting to know each other. And then they get to the point where they're going to start traveling to the different continents within this, fantasy world. One of my other favorite characters is this woman named Elizabeth Rain, and she's a lieutenant for a city-state far, far past on another continent. And she's sort of working as like a colonizer kind of woman. And she's very militaristic. She's very, very to the point, but she's also been mistreated extremely poorly by her superiors and her other soldiers. And so she's kind of in a point where she has this title, but she doesn't deserve that. She kind of, needs it or, wants it. She's kind of like forced on her kind of thing. And so when she kind of joins their group, it's sort of like a breather. She actually has people that care about her instead of her, doing her job.
So where do you leave us at the end of this book?
I leave you, a little spoiler kind of thing. I leave you kind of heartbroken. I'm not a big fan of writing like traditional good guy, bad guy kind of stories. I like the morally gray aspect of, the human nature and, how it makes people feel. I wanted to leave you sort of with hope at the end, as I kind of did with my first book. But I also wanted you to feel kind of like, well, it's a happy ending in a sense, but it's also like, it's kind of sucks. Kind of sucks to be that kind of person in that situation.
Oh, I'd say so. So this is book 2 of your trilogy.
Yes, I'm currently grinding away on the third one. Carrion lies. Carrion such as like corpse.
Well, that sounds interesting.
That one is going to be a doozy. I've been working on it for a while. It's going to be the longest one out of the 3. But it's bringing everybody, all the characters from the first and the second book, everybody's coming back. It's going to be a wild ride.
Thank you, Cameron James Box, Mortal Ties.
All righty. I appreciate it as well. This was a pleasure doing this with you.
We hope you enjoyed this edition of the ReaderHouse Author Roundtable, where authors from all walks of life come together to discuss the trials, tribulations, and triumphs of publishing their books. I'm Alice Stockton Rossini. We hope to see you back here every Saturday night at 8 o'clock, or listen to our podcast anytime on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, and PodServe, just to name a few. The Author Roundtable is sponsored by ReaderHouse Online Bookstore, where independent new authors come first.